And why has this happened to me, that the mother of my Lord comes to me? Luke chapter 1, verse 43. In the name of the Untitled God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Please be seated. The sermon this morning is entitled, Everything Happens for a Reason. We've all heard that saying before, everything happens for a reason. It is a phrase we hear often, but what does it truly mean for us as believers? How do we reconcile this statement with the unpredictable and sometimes painful experiences of life? Luke chapter 1, verse 43 captures the astonished words of Elizabeth as she receives a visit from her young relative Mary. You see, Mary had just learned that she is to bear the Son of God, Jesus Christ. Upon meeting Mary, Elizabeth's spirit, the baby in her womb, leaps in recognition of the divine purpose being fulfilled before her very own eyes. Her question, and why has this happened to me, that the mother of my Lord comes to me? This question points to a profound realization. You see, God orchestrates every moment, even the smallest interactions, the biggest, what we feel are setbacks or hurdles, all of this to fulfill God's sovereign purposes. Now, we all know that God knows what He's doing. The Bible consistently teaches us that God's ways are higher than our ways. And in the story of Mary and Elizabeth's encounter, we see the divine truth unfold. You see, Mary was a young woman from a very humble background, and yet from this background, and despite her young age, she was chosen to carry the Messiah. Elizabeth, she was an elderly woman who had long been barren, but she was also chosen for a miraculous pregnancy. She thought she was past her prime, but she would give birth to John the Baptist, the forerunner of Christ. So neither Mary nor Elizabeth could have ever foreseen these events. In a way, you could say they were blindsided. Yet both women trusted God's plan, even when it disrupted their expectations and probably threw them into chaos. So Elizabeth's question, why am I so favored, reflects her humility and awe at being part of God's grand design. Her life and Mary's life remind us that even when we don't understand why something is happening, what we can believe by faith is that God is weaving together a greater plan for God's glory to be revealed as God's goodness to our life. And so I ask this morning, have we found ourselves in a situation that we don't understand why things are happening the way they are? Perhaps we face a job loss, maybe a health challenge, maybe the loss of a loved one. In those moments where everything seems confusing, chaotic, and crumbling, it is very tempting to question God to become angry with God and the church and the people of God, and to forsake God. God understands this. But he also asks us to remember that just as he chose Mary, just as he chose Elizabeth for a purpose beyond their comprehension, God is working in our life in ways that we may not be able to see or understand. Because the saying, timing is everything. Consider the timing of Elizabeth and Mary's pregnancies. Elizabeth conceived in her old age, and no one could have ever imagined that she was at the time of her life where she would be pregnant. Mary conceived as a virgin. There was definitely no one that expected her to become pregnant at this time. She had just become betrothed to Joseph. Both of these pregnancies were, in reality, humanly impossible. Yet both of these women, both of their pregnancies, happened exactly when they needed to for God's plan to unfold in their life. Elizabeth's son, John the Baptist, was born just a few months before Jesus. Though people thought he may be the Messiah, John's mission was to prepare the way for the Messiah. Just imagine if he had been born earlier or later. The timing would not have aligned with Jesus' ministry. Similarly, Mary's pregnancy happened at the precise moment in history when God chose to send his son to the world. It was definitely not our Mary's time. In our lives, we often wrestle with God's timing. Why now, God? Why today? We may pray for something and feel frustrated when the answer doesn't come quickly as we'd like. We may think that God is slow. Does he even hear what I'm praying? Is my prayers really doing anything? But if we let Elizabeth and Mary's stories speak to us, their stories remind us that God's timing is never too early and never too late. God knows exactly when to act in our life. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verse 11 says, God has made everything beautiful in its time. When we trust God's timing, we can find peace even in waiting. Like Elizabeth and Mary, we can rest in the assurance that God is at work, orchestrating the events of our lives for his perfect purposes. So what does this mean for us practically? What it means is that nothing we have gone through, nothing we are currently going through, will be wasted. God uses every circumstance, every experience to glorify God's name. One of the most comforting truths for believers is found in Romans chapter 8, verse 28. There it says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to God's purpose. So what is God doing in your life today that you may not want, that you may not understand? Can you let God finish what he's doing? This verse doesn't promise that everything will be easy or pleasant. No, the Bible clearly says those who follow Christ will have to deny themselves and take up their cross in order to follow him. So those who preach differently about some kind of prosperity theology where everything is a bed of roses, that is false biblical teaching. God doesn't promise us that we will always understand what God is doing in our life. But God does promise that he is working right now in our life. In the joyful moments, in the painful moments, when we are on the hilltop, and even when we are in the dark place. And God is working right now for the good of those who love him. Because love never fails. Elizabeth and Mary experienced great joy in their pregnancies. But let's be real. They also experienced many challenges. You see, Elizabeth may have endured years of barrenness, possibly even societal shame before this miracle. Because in that day and age, a woman's value was pretty much wrapped up not in just having a child, but in having a male child. So imagine what she herself must have gone through in the years of barrenness and in a society that judged women for whether they were able to produce a male child. Mary faced the possibility of rejection. If there was anyone who deserved to be stoned in the eyes of the world, it was her. She deserved death. As an unmarried, pregnant woman in a very patriarchal society, how dare she? Yet both women trusted that God was using their circumstance for God's glory. So God asks us this morning, in our life, can we consider how God might be using our current situation for God's purposes? Perhaps a trial we are enduring is refining our character, maybe strengthening our faith, maybe preparing us to minister to others. You know, in my own life, in our family life, we've gone through many battles. And it has refined our character, strengthened our faith, and prepared us to minister to others. My wife had 3 miscarriages. If there's anyone who's going through a pregnancy or anyone who miscarries, trust me, she's a good person to talk to. Maybe a blessing that we have received, or even what we feel is a curse, might just be that opportunity to glorify God and share God's love with others. So what is our role in this? Our role, simply put, is to trust God and be faithful to obey. When Elizabeth recognized Mary as the mother of her Lord, she responded with faith and joy. Elizabeth didn't fully understand the magnitude of what was happening, but she trusted God's plan, and she obeyed God and praised God for his goodness. Similarly, Mary responded to the angel's announcement with humble obedience, saying, in Luke 1:38, I am the Lord's servant. May your word to me be fulfilled. Both women serve as examples of how we should respond to what is happening in our life. Trusting God, and let's be clear about this, trusting God doesn't mean you'll always have the answers or know what God's plan is. In fact, there are times when I've felt very stupid, not knowing what was going on. All the calculations, all of the things that I planned fell by the wayside. It doesn't mean that we won't face doubts, because I've had them. It doesn't mean that we won't be afraid, because I've been afraid. But what it does mean is choosing, despite all of that, to believe that God is good. And that even when our circumstances are difficult, choosing. And this doesn't happen just naturally. We have to choose to follow God in obedience, even when the way forward is unclear. In Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 and 6, we are reminded, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways submit to God, and God will make your paths straight. Trust in God. So as we reflect on the stories of Mary and Elizabeth, let us understand the truth that everything happens for a reason. Yes, God's plans are greater than our plans. God's ways are greater than our ways. And His timing is perfect. God uses every circumstance for His glory. And our role is to trust and obey. So as we enter into the season of Christmas, when we face moments of uncertainty, when we face pain and suffering in our life, remember and believe that what is happening in your life is part of God's grand design. And like Elizabeth, may we find ourselves asking God, God, why have you blessed me so? You see, the same Jesus who hung on the cross and asked, my God, why have you forsaken me? Is the same Jesus who had visions of paradise and who ultimately said, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. In the cross, there is a blessing. The answer to understanding all that is in God's love and our belief of God's purpose for our life. Brothers and sisters, God has chosen us to play a unique role in our homes, in our workplaces, in our neighborhoods, and in this world. And so I leave you with this. Always remember, everything happens for a reason. To God be the glory, now and forever.